Congratulations! You've made the decision to start your own company. And you know what your company is going to be building. But now you're wondering how to go about raising money for your company. Hi, my name is Naeem, and I'm making a series of videos for techies who are interested in all things related to technology startups. This particular video is on how to go about raising money that you need to launch your startup. It is completely applicable to non-techies as well, but I do find that it is usually us techies who are the most ignorant of this information. I do strongly recommend watching my video called 10 Steps to Starting Your Own Company. The link is in the description below. This particular video is focused on the raising money part, which is just one of the 10 steps from my other video. If you do find this content useful, please drop me a like and subscribe. I have many other videos planned, so if nothing else, this will encourage me to keep going. So without further ado, let's get to it. Actually, before we get to step one, let's do a little bit of a background on the size of your company as it grows, and then as it grows, the type of money it's going to need, what it's going to use that money for, and where is that money going to come from, because that stuff changes along with the stage that your company is at. Okay, so if you look at this, you can see where I'm talking about the stage of a company, the funding round, what it is generally called in the industry, and where the money is going to come from. So this video, it is focused on this particular round. It's very early. Your company may not have even started yet, may not have opened its doors yet. At this point, the money you're raising, it's generally called a bootstrap or a seed round. And the money generally comes from you are the founders, your friends and family, angel investors that you know of. So that's kind of where the money comes from at this point of your company. As your company gets a little bit larger, so let's say it's still early stage, maybe you've got a proof of concept built, you're trying to hire people. At that point, you're going to be raising a Series A round. And the money is going to come from angel investors and venture capital companies. As your company gets larger and larger, so you're at the point now that your product is on sale, your company is not yet profitable, but it's getting there. At this point, you're going to do a Series B is the most likely round that you're going to do, and the money is probably going to come from venture capital companies as well. And then as you go further down, your company's now growing fast. It might be profitable. You're going to go through a series of funding rounds, so Series C, D, E. Hopefully not that many, although some companies seem to be perpetual startups and always raising money and never become profitable, right? So anyways, these are what these are called. And the money is going to come from still from venture capitals, private equity firms, maybe public markets, which means an IPO sometimes. So there's a lot of companies now, it's kind of fashionable now where companies are larger and larger, growing faster, still not profitable, and yet going to the public markets, doing an IPO and raising money that way. It didn't used to be the case, but now it's fashionable. And then as you see the company, your company gets to a mature, profitable stage and it's trying to grow, it's trying to juice growth, it's trying to do maybe merger and acquisitions. And at this point, you have just an enormous number of different types of transactions that can occur. Your company could be sold, you could take funding from a private equity firm, all kinds of stuff. So at this point, you're generally in the private equity and PE market space. At this point, you're no longer in angels or VCs, they're gone. So that's kind of where people tend to be focused. We are here. This video is focused on this area where you're doing a seed round or a Series A round. Okay, so with that said, now that you have a little bit of the background for that, step one, you have to decide how much money to raise. And you're going to do a seed round or a Series A round. So now, since you raise money by selling a chunk of your ownership in your company, right, you have to balance a couple of things. So you want to raise enough money so that you have a comfortable runway, so you don't have to keep raising money again and again, while at the same time, you want to keep the amount as small as you can so that you don't have to sell too much of your ownership to get the money you need, right? So that's those are the two things that you want to balance. You should keep in mind that for a company that is on the right track, so it's growing, executing, doing well, the cost of money declines over time. That is, you will have to sell less and less of your ownership in your later rounds, the better you're doing. So that's kind of something you want to keep in mind. So you may want to, so my suggestion, what's my suggestion? When your company is brand new, just starting, raise enough money to last you 9 months to a year. Let's use a super rough example. So let's say you expect to have 3 people on your payroll Payroll is the bulk of where your money goes, by the way, obviously, when you're new, unless you're a weird startup. Anyways, let's say you expect 3 people on your payroll for the first 3 months, then another six, not another six, total of 6 people for another 3 months, and then maybe 10 total people working for you for another three. So let's further go ahead and say that your average salary is going to be $100,000 because early people are probably going to be engineer types, techie types, and those tend to cost more a little bit. So let's say your average salary is $100,000, budget another 20% for benefits and administration costs. So that comes out to 120 grand a year or $10,000 a month. So the first 3 months you'll be spending $30,000 a month for your 3 people, then $60,000 a month for the next 3 months, then $100,000 a month for the next 3 months. So if you total that up, your first 9 month payroll is going to be around $570,000. Add in more money for admin, equipment, office rent, hosting fees, etc., etc. You probably want to raise about $1 million to be confident that this would last you between 9 months to a year, and then you can go ahead and start the next fundraising round 9 months after closing this round. Hopefully that makes sense. So you've decided how much to raise. Once you know that, step 2 is to hire a good corporate attorney who specializes in startups. You might find this a strange step, but trust me, a good business lawyer will be extremely helpful getting your business going. And the earlier you hire them, the easier your other steps are going to be. A good lawyer will help you navigate the legal requirements in starting a business. They will help you before you make a mistake, run into problems, and need a lawyer for the wrong reasons, right? So get them early and get a good one early. They're invaluable in getting you connected to other resources that you will need. So you need to make connections to well-heeled individuals when you're asking for money, whether you're looking for other types of resources. A good lawyer can be invaluable to your efforts. So how do you go about finding this resource? Well, talk to other startups that you know in your area, or even ones that you don't know. Just walk in and ask this question, ask to talk to them. Most people are pretty forthcoming. They will tell you if they have a good lawyer that they work with, they have a good relationship with them, they will refer them to you. If they work with somebody that they don't like, they'll probably disclose that to you as well. So you want to know. So talk to a few startup companies, get some referrals to some attorneys. Talk to startup incubators in your area. So there's going to be venture capital firms in your area that specialize in helping small companies get going. So talk to them. They will probably have some lawyers that they know and work with, so they can tell you who they are. Once you've kind of narrowed it down to a few attorneys, then take them to lunch, have a conversation with them, see what experience they have in assisting startups. If they have any experience in your specific field, which would be great, what their fee structure is going to be like, whether it's going to be how many dollars per hour, or whether they will work on a monthly retainer, or whether it'll be a fixed cost to do a certain amount of things. Get that information out and then make a selection of which lawyer you feel comfortable working with. So that is step 2. Get a good lawyer. They will grease the wheels for the other steps. Okay, now that you know, let's go on to step 3. Now that you know how much money you need to determine the quantity and type of shares that you're going to offer investors in exchange for their money, right? So first, let's talk about the types of shares. In general, you'll probably want to create 2 classes of shares, common and preferred. The main difference between common and preferred shares is that preferred shares have no voting rights, but they're first in line for dividends and any claims on your company's assets if it goes under, right? Common shares have voting rights, but they're last in line if your company goes under. So what this means is, obviously should be pretty clear, that as an investor, as an owner, as a founder, you need the common shares. You're going to be last in line when your company is successful, right? But you will have the voting shares to control the destiny of your company. The investors will get the shares that have preference on the money a company makes, because they actually put real hard money in, but at the same time, they won't have the voting rights, so they won't be able to steer your company in a direction that you don't want them to. But you want to retain as much of your control of your company as possible, even though you are selling ownership in it to investors. So in general, investors get preferred shares, you get common shares. There are many other types of voting of share structures also, and your attorney will help you determine that. You can, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, some of them anyways. So let's talk about the quantity of shares that you want to offer. Using a previous example, right, where we wanted to raise $1 million. Let's say the estimated value of our company is $3 million. Obviously, nothing exists today. It's not worth $3 million today. So this is a little forward looking. You're looking at the IP that you're going to be building, your projections, and you're coming up with an estimate. You're valuing your company at $3 million, and then you're saying, I'm going to sell a third of my company and raise $1 million. So how do you go about structuring the shares for your $1 million? Looking at a $1 million raise over a $3 million valuation, you would create, as an example, a pool of 3 million shares with 2 million common shares and 1 million preferred shares, each share valued at $1 each, right? So you as the founder would keep the 2 million common shares with the 100% of the voting rights and sell the 1 million preferred shares to investors at $1 a share. So you sell 1 million shares at $1 a share, you get your $1 million. This is just one simple example. You could do so many other different structures. You could create a pool of 30 million shares at 10 cents per share. You could have other classes of shares. You could allow some preferred shares to have some voting rights. You could create option pools and incent early investors with options in addition to shares. There's a whole number of ways you can structure this, and this is another place where your lawyer will be very, very helpful in crafting the right instrument to raise funds. So that was step 3, determine the type and quantity of shares that you're going to be selling to raise funds. Step 4, you have to put together a private placement memorandum, also called a PPM for short. This is a document that contains your business plan, your estimates and projections for cost and growth, the resumes of your founders, or you and your fellow founders, if there are any, and the details of the investment. By the way, if you had seen the 10-step video that I mentioned earlier, you will have a corporate attorney by now, and this attorney will have helped you in steps 1 through 3. And they will have the boilerplate documents for everything you need. And they will have the PPM boilerplate as well. So you can work with them in putting together the PPM. There are plenty of other videos out there on the web that show you how to write a good business plan that goes into a PPM. So I'm not going to get into the details of that. Just know that you have to build a private placement memorandum document. And the thing that you also find probably unique about a PPM is that these are numbered documents. You will create a certain number of copies of your PPM, let's say 300 copies, and then each copy is going to be numbered. So 1 of 300, 2 of 300, 3 of 300. And then when you hand these PPM documents out to individual prospective investors, you have to keep a log of, so-and-so, you handed this document 3 of 300 to them. So you can track who has these, because these documents contain stuff that is private information to your company that you don't want just getting out on the interwebs. So you want to control the flow of information a little bit. It also gives it a good air of legitimacy when you do that. So, and as I mentioned before, the PPM will also have the investment mechanics, which is information like the minimum investment required, the amount and type of shares that will be received by the investor, the rights those shares will confer upon the investor, etc., etc. There'll also be a letter that the investor can fill out indicating how much they're putting in. Also where they're saying that they are a qualified investor, which has certain questions that go along with it. And then they will fill out this letter, they'll sign this letter, they'll tear it out of the PPM, they will affix a check to that letter with the amount that they're investing in, and they'll give that to you. This is what you receive. So from a PPM that you give out to people, you get back these letters with their information filled out and with a check attached to it, and you're going to take those checks, put them in your company's bank account, and you're going to record the investor's information in a company's investor roster, which is something that you will have to maintain for your company for the life of your company. In addition to the PPM, you will also need a compelling presentation that boils down the PPM into a format for show and tell, right? So a small PowerPoint deck or something like that. So once you have these fundraising documents put together, we're going to move on to step 5, which is get in front of investors. You should have, in addition to your PPM and your presentation deck, an elevator pitch, just a minute or 2 on what your company will be doing and why it will be successful. The object is to get people interested. You need to identify who to pitch to. At this super early stage, this will probably be well-heeled individuals, maybe friends and family. You want to connect with other local startups in your area, get introductions to their investors, which they might be willing to do, because an introduction is always better than a cold contact. Just don't be calling out, picking up the phone book and calling a bunch of people. That doesn't work. you want to be connected. You want to connect so start that process early of connecting and talking to people who can then put you in touch with their own investors. That always helps. Your local area will probably have several venture capital firms that's focused on incubating early stage startups. Get a relationship going with them, talk to them, have a conversation with them, and see even if they might invest in a company, or they might, if it's too early for them, then they might point you in the direction of some people whom they think might be a good fit for what you're trying to do. You can also reach out to financial advisors. These are investment professionals that manage people's money for them, and they will have access to well-heeled individuals that they can introduce you to. Once again, your lawyer will be able to help here as well. So they will have connections to people who can invest or people who can help you raise the funds as well. One piece of advice: try and keep the minimum investment amount as high as possible, depending, given your area. The higher the minimum investment is, the fewer investors you will need, which in itself a desirable thing, but it also means that these investors will be more sophisticated, which is also very desirable. You want to avoid the situation where you've got a whole bunch of $5,000 investors that you have to keep track of. And plus, you also want to avoid family members taking out second mortgages to put in a large amount of money in your company. Both are bad things. You want to have a small pool of sophisticated investors who've each put in a substantial amount of money. That is the best mix. Hold group meetings with prospective investors. So bring like 10 prospective investors together and pitch them. You go through your deck, you answer questions. A group setting always allows people to ask better questions overall, and you learn a lot, and you can answer those questions, and it gets you better as well. And then plus, this whole group setting engenders a birds of a feather kind of feeling in the group. The people are more likely to feel comfortable investing if they see their peers investing as well, right? Ask your early investors to introduce you to other investors. So you can probably tell that this is a lot of work, and that's because it is a lot of work. And get used to the long hours. It's not going to get any easier, but the rewards are well worth it. So that was my 5 steps to raising money for your startup. I hope you found this content useful. If you did, as I mentioned before, please consider subscribing, giving me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I will try to answer them. Thank you.